Look, lady, I don't know what kind of back alley hustle you're trying to pull, but this flimsy piece of paper isn't fooling a damn soul in here." The words, dripping with a greasy, unearned confidence, slithered through the cavernous, air-conditioned lobby of Sterling Trust Bank. Kevin Riley, a teller whose smarmy grin was a permanent fixture on his face, held up the $93,000 check as if it were a soiled napkin. He dangled it between his thumb and forefinger, a theatrical gesture of contempt designed for an audience. At the polished granite counter stood Dr. Aerys Thorne, a portrait of unnerving stillness. Her hands, adorned with a single, elegant platinum ring, rested calmly on the cool stone. But beneath the surface, her knuckles were blooming white, betraying a pressure that could turn coal into diamond. Have you ever felt that? That moment where the world shrinks to a single point of unbearable pressure, where every fiber of your being screams to react, to unleash a storm, but some deeper, colder instinct takes over and locks you in a state of absolute, terrifying calm? Before we dive into this insane story of what happens when corporate prejudice meets a power it could never comprehend, do me a solid and annihilate that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You are not going to want to miss a single second of this. And let me start with a question for you in the comments below. What is the single most condescending, infuriating thing a so-called professional has ever said to you? Kevin, high on his pissant throne of institutional authority, wasn't done. He waved the check higher, a flag of his own presumed victory, drawing snickering glances from his co-worker, Brittany, who was pretending to sort receipts, but was absorbing the drama with vampiric glee. The bank's security guard, a man named Frank, whose uniform was stretched taut over a belly full of cheap donuts and self-importance, shifted his weight, his hand drifting instinctively towards the radio on his hip. He was a sentinel guarding the gates of mediocrity from the threat of... what exactly? A successful black woman? Then Kevin did the unthinkable. With a deliberate, agonizing slowness, he tore the check in half. The sound, a sharp, guttural rip, echoed off the vaulted ceilings and marble floors, a sound that felt more violent than a gunshot in the cathedral-like silence. The two halves of the check fluttered to the ground, two wounded birds with broken wings landing at the base of the counter. The whispers started then, a ripple of judgment spreading through the lobby. Every customer in line turned to stare, their eyes a mixture of pity, suspicion, and morbid curiosity, all fixed on the woman who was now the unwilling star of this matinee of humiliation. The digital clock on the wall glowed with impassive red digits. 2:46 p.m. 14 minutes until Sterling Trust Bank closed its doors to the public, but Kevin Riley was performing as if he had all the time in the world, as if this was his grand opera. He nudged one of the torn pieces with the toe of his scuffed loafer, a gesture of profound disrespect. A project completion bonus from Ethelred Innovations? His voice boomed with mock incredulity, each word a hammer blow. Honey, I've lived in this city my entire life. I know every legitimate company from the Fortune 500s down to the corner hot dog stand. Never heard of them. He looked to Brittany for affirmation, and she gave him a slight conspiratorial nod. Like a shark sensing a single drop of blood in a vast ocean, branch manager Sharon Vance materialized from her glass-walled office. Her heels clicked against the marble with a predatory rhythm, a sound that promised no mercy. She was a woman who saw the world as a series of problems to be managed, and people as assets or liabilities. She didn't bother to examine the evidence on the floor or speak to the customer at the center of the commotion. She had already chosen her side. "What seems to be the trouble, Kevin?" she asked, though her tone made it clear it wasn't a question. Her arms were crossed, her gaze sweeping over Aerys with a dismissive air that had been perfected over 2 decades of middle management. Unseen by the bank staff, in the far corner of the line, a woman named Maria Flores discreetly angled her smartphone. Her thumb swiped across the screen, and a small red light blinked on. A live stream, silent and unnoticed, began to gather witnesses from the digital ether. I'll need to see 3 forms of government-issued ID, a social security card, and a utility bill or lease agreement dated within the last 30 days as proof of address, Sharon demanded. Each requirement was a brick being placed in a wall, a gate slamming shut. Aerys, without a word, reached into her sleek black Bottega Veneta handbag, a bag worth more than Kevin's entire wardrobe, and produced a flawless set of documents: a passport, a driver's license, a global entry card, her social security card, and a digital copy of her condo's recent utility bill on her phone. Sharon took them, her fingers barely grazing Aerys's. She examined each piece with the exaggerated suspicion of a B-movie detective, holding the driver's license up to the light, angling it back and forth as if hoping to find the telltale shimmer of a cheap forgery. "Well, these are sophisticated," she announced, her voice loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. "The scammers are getting incredibly good at faking IDs these days. The technology is just so accessible." The accusation, cloaked in a thin veil of professional caution, landed like a physical slap. On Maria's live stream, the viewer count, which had been a modest 12, suddenly jumped to 48. The comments began to pour in. "Are you seeing this? Unbelievable. This is pure racism in 2025. A new hashtag began to coalesce in the digital storm, or sterling trust shame. Throughout this excruciating ordeal, Aerys maintained a supernatural calm. Her eyes flickered down to the platinum Patek Philippe watch encircling her wrist. It was a subtle signal of wealth and status so profound that it was completely invisible to the willfully ignorant eyes of the bank staff. To them, it was just a watch. They couldn't comprehend that it was a timepiece worth more than the car Sharon Vance drove. Frank, the security guard, took his cue from the manager. He moved with a practiced, deliberate casualness, positioning himself directly behind Aerys. The subtle shift in his posture changed the entire energy of the room, turning a tense customer service issue into a silent, physical threat. His radio crackled with static as he adjusted the volume, the sharp, rasping sound making a young mother nearby flinch and instinctively pull her 2 small children closer. The little girls, no older than 5 or 6, stared with wide, unblinking eyes, absorbing a masterclass in prejudice that they were too young to understand, but would be old enough to remember forever. "Settlement checks, bonus checks, they're classic fraud tactics," Kevin lectured to Sharon, though he was gesturing at Aerys as if she were an exhibit in a zoo. He was puffed up, an expert in a field he'd just invented. "They always come in right before closing. They hope we're too rushed to do the proper verification. It's textbook scammer behavior." To emphasize his point, he bent down, picked up one of the torn halves of the check, and ripped off another corner, letting the small triangle of paper fall to the floor. His act of destruction was complete, but his campaign of humiliation was just getting started. The clock now read 2:51 p.m. Aerys's phone buzzed silently in her purse. A calendar notification, Nexus Innovations Board meeting, 4 p.m. sharp. She silenced it without looking, but not before Sharon's hawk-like eyes noticed the expensive smartphone and the corporate calendar alert. A corner of a first-class boarding pass peeked out from a pocket in Aerys's blazer. Delta 1, LAX to JFK. Passenger, Dr. Aerys Thorne. Another clue, hiding in plain sight, completely ignored. "I'm going to have to call this into corporate security for verification," Sharon announced, her voice filled with a theatrical urgency. She was dialing her desk phone, her movements slow and deliberate for the benefit of her audience. "Yes. Hello, this is Sharon Vance, branch manager at the downtown flagship location. I have a potential high-level fraud situation here. It involves a very large, suspicious bonus check from a company we can't identify. Her voice carried across the lobby, transforming Aerys's private financial business into a public spectacle. The live stream viewer count exploded past 150. Maria Flores, a silent narrator, provided a running commentary in the chat. Professional black woman being treated like a criminal at Sterling Trust downtown. They tore up her check and are calling her a scammer. Manager Sharon Vance, teller Kevin Riley. Miles away, in a high-rise law office, a prominent civil rights activist named Marcus Cole saw the notification for the live stream pop-up. He clicked on it, his brow furrowing as he immediately recognized the systematic patterns of discrimination he had spent his entire career fighting. Back in the bank, Kevin had produced a laminated fraud prevention chart from under his counter. He was pointing at various security features on a sample check, building his fraudulent case against Aerys. "You see these watermarks?" he said to a now frowning Mr. Moore Henderson, an elderly white man in line. "They're too perfect, too crisp, obviously computer-generated. Real corporate checks have slight imperfections, tiny variations from the printing process. That's how you know they're authentic." His confidence was a self-fueling engine, feeding on Sharon's encouraging nods and the uncomfortable, complicit silence of the other customers. Mr. Henderson, impatient and annoyed, muttered just loud enough to be heard, "Some people will do anything for a handout." The phrase hung in the air, thick and loaded, a piece of coded prejudice that allowed him to express his bigotry without using overtly racist language. The young mother, Ashley, whispered to her twins to stay close to her, her maternal instinct screaming that there was a danger in this room that went far beyond a simple disagreement. Sharon's call to corporate security was a masterpiece of performative bureaucracy. She put the call on speakerphone, and everyone could hear the distant clacking of keyboards as Aerys's information was presumably being flagged in every security database from Boston to Bangkok. "We're running a full background verification," Sharon announced to the room at large. "These sophisticated fraud rings are often linked to larger criminal enterprises. We have to be thorough." Frank's radio crackled again, this time with a new, unheard instruction. He gave a grim nod and took another step closer to Aerys, deliberately invading her personal space. It was a classic intimidation tactic, designed to make a person feel trapped and powerless. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble of authority that turned a request into a command. "I'm going to need you to step away from the counter and come with me. We can discuss this in private." His hand came to rest on his equipment belt, a subtle, menacing gesture that did not go unnoticed by the hundreds of people now watching Maria's live stream. The viewer count hit 278. The comments were flying too fast for Maria to even read. "Call the ACP. This bank is done. Someone get this woman a lawyer, now." The digital outrage was building into a tidal wave, but in the eye of the storm, Aerys Thorne remained preternaturally calm. She checked her Patek Philippe watch again. 2:53 p.m. 7 minutes until closing. Sharon finally hung up the phone, her face a mask of smug, bureaucratic satisfaction. "Corporate security has placed a fraud alert on your profile, pending a full investigation. We will not be able to process any transactions for you until that verification is complete. Typically, that takes 5 to 7 business days." She delivered this verdict like a judge sentencing a criminal, her eyes watching Aerys closely, waiting, almost hoping for a crack in her composure, for tears, for anger, for a confession. But Aerys didn't break. Instead, she did something utterly unexpected. A slow smile spread across her face. It wasn't a smile of humor or submission. It was a smile of profound, unsettling confidence. It was the smile of a chess grandmaster who sees the checkmate 17 moves ahead. Her fingers, a concert pianist's fingers, drummed a single, silent staccato rhythm on the granite countertop. It was a gesture of patience, not nervousness. "Interesting timing," Aerys said softly. They were the first words she had spoken since the ordeal began. Her voice, though quiet, was infused with an authority that resonated deeper than Sharon's performative shouting. It was a voice of steel wrapped in velvet, a voice that made the manager's aggression seem suddenly childish and frantic. She glanced up at the large promotional video screen mounted on the wall, then back at Sharon, that same enigmatic, unnerving smile playing on her lips. The clock on the wall showed 2:54 p.m. And in that moment, something fundamental shifted in the power dynamic of the room. Nobody could have said exactly what it was, but the hunter had just realized she was locked in a cage with a tiger. At 2:55 p.m., Sharon Vance's confidence began to fray at the edges, unnerved by the doctor's mysterious, triumphant smile. She chose to double down, wrapping herself in the armor of institutional authority. "As I said, corporate security requires full verification," she announced, her voice a little too loud, a little too shrill. "We cannot allow potential fraud to compromise the integrity of this institution, regardless of how sophisticated the attempt." Maria Flores's live stream was now a full-blown viral event, the viewer count rocketing past 500 as the story was shared across citywide networks. Comments flooded the feed, a digital torrent of outrage transforming a private humiliation into a public execution of a brand's reputation. 20 blocks away, a local news producer, Jessica Kim, grabbed her keys and sprinted for the news van. Her assignment editor was screaming in her ear, "Get down to the Sterling Trust on 5th Avenue. There's a live discrimination event happening and it's blowing up. Go, go, go!" Her van cut through the dense city traffic, its siren a distant herald of the approaching media storm. Kevin, meanwhile, was on the phone with his regional supervisor, his voice filled with a self-important theatrical gravity. "Yes, sir. We've successfully intercepted a major fraud attempt. A counterfeit bonus check for $93,000. The suspect is claiming it's from a company called Ethelred Innovations, but we've run a preliminary search, and the company is a ghost." "Fa." He paused, stealing a glance at Aerys, expecting to see her crumbling under the weight of his investigative genius. Instead, her calm demeanor seemed to have deepened into something that looked disturbingly like amusement. This only fueled his resolve to expose her supposed crime. Deep within Sterling Trust's corporate headquarters, a sprawling campus of glass and steel 20 miles away, alarms were blaring on the screens of the social media monitoring team. David Park, the head of digital marketing, was typing frantically in a corporate Slack channel. "Urgent. Code Red PR situation developing at downtown flagship. Viral live stream alleging racial discrimination. Need crisis comms and legal involved immediately. Sterling Trust shame is trending." High-level executives were being pulled out of late-afternoon meetings, their phones buzzing with urgent alerts. A public relations disaster was metastasizing in real time. On the ground, Frank, the security guard, adopted a more aggressive stance, using his physical presence to subtly control Aerys's potential escape routes. "We're going to need some additional identification, ma'am," he demanded, repositioning himself to block her path to the exit. His tactical maneuvering, learned in a weekend course on loss prevention, was transforming the elegant marble lobby into a makeshift interrogation room, with Aerys surrounded by hostile staff and a gallery of increasingly uncomfortable customers. That discomfort was curdling into barely concealed prejudice among some. Mr. Henderson checked his gold Rolex and sighed dramatically. "Some people just have to create problems for everyone else, right at closing time," he muttered, his voice loud enough for those around him to hear and nod in agreement. Ashley, the young mother, clutched her twin daughter's hands so tightly their knuckles were white. Their innocent eyes were absorbing this ugly masterclass in institutional racism, a lesson they were too young to comprehend, but would be old enough to internalize. They would remember the feeling of this room for the rest of their lives. 2:56 p.m. The situation escalated. Sharon, now desperate to regain control, decided to deploy her nuclear option. "Attempting to defraud a federally insured financial institution is a felony," she declared, her hand hovering over her desk phone like a hangman's noose. "I am left with no choice but to contact the police to ensure proper procedure is followed." The threat hung in the air, a weapon designed to shatter Aerys's composure and force her into a confession or flight. The remaining customers in line began to physically distance themselves, not wanting to be associated with what was now being framed as a serious criminal event. But Aerys did not break. She calmly checked her phone, not with the frantic energy of someone caught in a lie, but with the methodical precision of a project manager confirming that all assets were in their expected positions. As she did, the contents of her open handbag were momentarily visible: a platinum corporate American Express card, an executive lounge membership card for a prestigious airline, the first-class boarding pass. All the trappings of a high-powered executive remained utterly invisible to the bank staff, who were so committed to their narrative of criminality that they were blind to the mountain of evidence contradicting it. The live-stream viewer count surged past 800. Maria Flores was now providing a hushed, urgent commentary. "They are now threatening to call the police on this professional woman, simply for trying to bank while black. This is happening at the Sterling Trust flagship branch. The manager is Sharon Vance, the teller is Kevin Riley. Her documentation was transforming passive viewers into an army of digital activists. Several were already looking up corporate contact information, preparing to flood the bank's phone lines and email servers. Kevin, meanwhile, had embarked on his own amateur forensic investigation. This driver's license hologram, it appears altered," he announced with the confidence of a seasoned FBI agent. "And the corporate ID she presented uses non-standard fonts. That's a common sign of forgery." His forensic theater was deeply impressive to Sharon, who nodded approvingly at his thoroughness. Neither of them realized they were critiquing the advanced, multi-layered security features of legitimate government and corporate documents, their ignorance posing as expertise. 2:57 p.m. The call from the real corporate security team came through to Sharon's desk. "They want to speak with her directly," Sharon announced with a hint of bureaucratic satisfaction. "It's standard procedure in a high-level fraud investigation." She extended the receiver to Aerys like a challenge, expecting this direct confrontation to finally unravel the supposed deception. Aerys accepted the phone without a flicker of concern. "This is Dr. Aerys Thorne," she stated, her voice clear and even. "Employee identification number AT739 Alpha, corporate account holder with Sterling Trust since 2018. She rattled off a series of specific details, verification codes, and security answers that were so precise and accurate that Sharon's face began to betray the first signs of genuine confusion. This wasn't the behavior of a cornered scammer. It was the behavior of a legitimate, high-level client. The conversation on the phone continued, with Aerys providing additional layers of authentication with unwavering precision. On the other end of the line, the corporate security officer's tone began to shift, morphing from suspicious interrogation to professional courtesy as he accessed her actual, extensive account records. "Thank you, Dr. Thorne. Your verification is complete. My apologies for the inconvenience," the voice on the phone concluded, the tone crisp and final. Sharon's confidence wavered, a visible crack in her armor of self-righteousness. But Kevin, ever the loyal soldier in his own imaginary war, refused to surrender. "Sophisticated criminals do their homework," he explained to anyone who would listen. "They gather real information on their targets to support their elaborate deceptions. That's what makes these fraud rings so dangerous and hard to detect." His ability to build a narrative of conspiracy out of thin air was, in its own way, remarkable, On the wall-mounted television, Sterling Trust's promotional loop continued its cycle. A series of smiling, diverse faces appeared on screen, a campaign that stood in stark, hypocritical contrast to the ugly discrimination unfolding directly beneath it. Sterling Trust, your success is our mission. The tagline scrolled across the screen, an indictment of the staff who were actively working to criminalize one of their most successful customers. The irony was not lost on the live stream viewers, whose outrage intensified with each hollow corporate platitude. Ashley's young daughters, sensing a shift in the room's tension, began asking uncomfortable questions in loud, childish whispers. "Mommy, why is that nice lady in trouble? What did she do wrong?" Their innocent curiosity forced Ashley to confront the reality of the racism her children were witnessing firsthand, though she struggled to find an age-appropriate explanation for the institutional prejudice they were absorbing like a toxic sponge. 2:58 p.m. Frank, the security guard, ever the stickler for procedure, produced a clipboard and a pen. "Completion of an incident report is mandatory for all suspected fraudulent activity," he announced, brandishing the form like a weapon. His law enforcement background was evident in the way he framed his questions, each one designed to elicit incriminating responses from a suspect under pressure. But Aerys's answers completely confounded his expectations. "Occupation?" he grunted. "Chief Innovation Officer." "Origin of the check?" "Project completion bonus, stemming from a corporate acquisition. The acquiring entity was Ethelred Innovations." Her executive vocabulary, her unshakable confidence, her complete lack of fear, it all painted a picture of someone far more comfortable in a corporate boardroom than in a police interrogation room. She was dismantling their assumptions one calm, precise answer at a time. The live stream viewer count crossed 1,000. Digital accountability was arriving in real time, transforming a private humiliation into a public spectacle of scrutiny that was now demanding an immediate corporate response. The regional director for Sterling Trust, a man named Thomas Bradley, received an emergency alert on his phone while in the middle of a steak dinner at an exclusive downtown restaurant. His assistant's text message was blunt. "Crisis, downtown branch. Viral live stream. Discrimination allegations. Immediate intervention required." At the same time, Marcus Cole, the civil rights activist, pulled up in a car outside the bank. He remained in his vehicle, documenting the scene through the large glass windows, while providing live updates to his massive social media following. His presence signaled a dangerous escalation. This incident had now attracted the attention of organized civil rights advocates, elevating the stakes from a simple customer service failure to a potential landmark legal battle. 2:59 p.m. Sharon's desk phone began to ring, and it didn't stop. Multiple lines lit up at once. Incoming calls from corporate headquarters, from regional management, from the crisis communications team. The little fire she had started as a routine act of customer intimidation had mushroomed into a 5-alarm institutional emergency, requiring executive-level damage control. The color drained from her face as she began to grasp the terrifying magnitude of her miscalculation. Kevin, however, continued to defend his fortress of delusion, even as the evidence against his theory mounted. "These elaborate schemes often include real corporate connections to throw us off the scent," he insisted to Sharon, even as other staff members began to back away from him, their expressions a mixture of doubt and fear. His commitment to being right had completely overshadowed the mountain of proof that he was catastrophically, career-endingly wrong. Aerys checked her watch one final time. Her enigmatic smile now held a new quality. Unmistakable, triumphant anticipation. The countdown that had begun as an exercise in institutional pressure against her had transformed into something else entirely. It was a clock ticking down not to her defeat, but to their destruction. Every passing second brought her closer to a revelation that would not just shift the power dynamic, but shatter it completely. Her attention shifted to the promotional video on the wall. A new cycle was beginning. Her calm confidence was that of a person waiting for a precisely timed, pre-planned event, not someone desperately hoping for a rescue. 1 minute until closing. 1 minute until everything changed forever. 3:04 p.m. The official closing time for Sterling Trust Bank arrived with the finality of a judge's gavel. The automatic doors hissed shut and locked, but nobody inside moved. The atmosphere was thick with a tension that was about to snap. Dr. Aerys Thorne stood at the epicenter of it all, a beacon of calm in a storm of institutional prejudice that was about to explode in a way her accusers could not possibly fathom. And if you're on the edge of your seat, wondering what biblical level of karma is about to be unleashed, show some love and smash that like button. Let's be real, we've all dreamed of a moment like this. Let's live vicariously through her. With the deliberate, precise movements of someone who had been waiting for this exact second, Aerys pulled out her smartphone. Her fingers moved with the practiced efficiency of a C-suite executive navigating a complex world of information. She dialed a single number from her contacts. 1 ring, 2 rings. Then, a crisp, professional voice answered on the other end. "Jasmine, this is Aerys." Her words, spoken in that same quiet, controlled tone, somehow cut through the tension and carried across the entire marble lobby with crystalline clarity. Every syllable was perfectly enunciated, designed for maximum impact. "Execute Protocol Omega." She paused, listening to the response on the other end, her eyes locked on Sharon Vance's. A predatory stillness had settled over her. "Yes, right now. Full and immediate implementation." Another brief pause. "Confirmed. All systems are go." The call ended with a soft click that seemed to echo in the silence, a sound somehow more definitive and more terrifying than the ripping of the check. Aerys then turned her body slightly, directing her attention to the small, dark dome of the security camera mounted on the wall above Sharon's workstation. Her movement was fluid, purposeful. When she spoke again, her voice projected with the practiced authority of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms and auditoriums. "For the record," she began, each word a precision-guided missile. "I am Dr. Aerys Thorne, Chief Innovation Officer of Ethelred Innovations. Arthur, the name of the company, the one Kevin had so contemptuously dismissed as fictional, now landed with the weight of an anvil. It settled in Sharon's stomach like liquid concrete. Ethelred Innovations. Why did that name sound so familiar? So critically, terrifyingly important? The connection was there, just beneath the surface of her panic, but her mind couldn't grasp it. Kevin's fortress of fraud conviction began to crumble. This was a detail his conspiracy theory couldn't account for. "Corporate executives don't use neighborhood branches like this," he stammered, clutching the torn pieces of the check with a desperation that was becoming pathetic. "Real CEOs, they have private bankers. They don't wait in line." His amateur psychology couldn't conceive of an executive who might prioritize first-hand experience, especially when evaluating the operational health of an institution they were about to acquire. Maria Flores's live stream had become appointment viewing for nearly 2,000 people. Her hushed commentary was filled with awe. "Something massive is about to happen," she whispered into her phone's microphone. "This woman, she's been too calm, too confident this whole time. She knows something they don't. She's been in control from the very beginning." As if on cue, the wall-mounted television, which had been cycling through the bank's promotional content, flickered. The screen went black for a single, pregnant second, drawing every eye in the room. This wasn't a technical difficulty, it was a scheduled interruption. When the screen came back to life, it wasn't displaying Sterling Trust's smiling, diverse faces. It was the breaking news banner of a major financial news network. A well-known news anchor appeared, her expression serious, urgent graphics blazing behind her. "We are interrupting our regularly scheduled programming with a breaking story from the world of finance," she announced. Ethelred Innovations, the global technology and logistics giant, has just completed its historic $4.3 billion acquisition of Sterling Trust Bank and all its holdings, creating the largest tech-driven financial institution in the region. The words hit the lobby like a physical shockwave. Every conversation stopped, every breath caught in every throat. Every single assumption that had been made in that room for the past half hour crumbled to dust as reality violently restructured itself around this single, cataclysmic piece of information. Sharon's hand, which had been halfway to her ringing desk phone, froze in mid-air. Kevin stared at the screen, his face a mask of slack-jawed horror, the expression of a man watching his entire world dissolve in real time. The news anchor continued, her voice a precise, devastating scalpel. The acquisition, which was finalized just moments ago, will be overseen by Ethelred's celebrated Chief Innovation Officer, Dr. Aerys Thorne, who is known for her revolutionary approach to corporate transformation and digital integration. Kevin's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and then pure, abject terror. The torn fragments of the check in his palm, which seconds ago had been his proof of a foiled scam, now represented something infinitely worse. They were documented evidence of his own petty, discriminatory destruction of legitimate corporate compensation belonging to his new ultimate boss. A professional headshot of Dr. Aerys Thorne filled the television screen. The same confident expression, the same intelligent, piercing eyes, the same unnervingly calm demeanor of the woman standing not 10 feet away from them at the counter. The caption beneath the photo read, "Dr. Aerys Thorne, Chief Innovation Officer, Ethelred Innovations." She was smiling with the quiet, unassailable authority of someone who had just acquired their entire institutional existence. "Holy Mother of God," Mr. Henderson whispered from the line. His earlier, prejudiced comment about handouts now echoed in his memory, a permanent stain on his character. The elderly man who had felt so comfortable expressing his casual racism was now confronted with the consequences he could never have imagined. Sharon Vance began to hyperventilate, soft, wheezing gasps for air. The brutal, terrifying mathematics of the situation was crashing over her in waves of nausea. She hadn't just discriminated against a customer. She had publicly humiliated, berated, and threatened to have arrested the single most important executive responsible for her bank's future, her branch's survival, and her own continued employment. The institutional hierarchy she believed had protected her, empowered her prejudice, had not just been flipped, it had been inverted, reversed, and shattered. The news report delivered more devastating context. Sources say Dr. Thorne's project completion bonus for successfully spearheading this multi-billion-dollar acquisition was $93,000, a sum she reportedly planned to deposit at a Sterling Trust branch this afternoon, before assuming her new executive responsibilities and conducting her first board meeting. The anchor's words transformed Kevin's confident fraud accusations into documented, time-stamped evidence of bigotry and incompetence. Frank, the security guard, began to slowly, almost imperceptibly, back away from Aerys. The full, horrifying understanding was flooding his consciousness. His tactical positioning, his subtle threats, his practiced intimidation, it had all been directed against the person who now held absolute institutional authority over every aspect of his professional life. Career suicide had rarely been so thoroughly and publicly documented. The only sound of innocence in the entire lobby came from Ashley's daughters. "Mommy, look! The nice lady is on TV!" they exclaimed, their voices filled with childish delight. Their pure, unadulterated joy stood in stark contrast to the thick, suffocating adult panic that was spreading through the room like a virus. Their mother quickly shushed them, her own mind reeling as she processed the sheer magnitude of the discrimination she had just witnessed against someone with the power to respond with the force of a hurricane. The breaking news segment concluded with one final devastating detail. The integration of the two companies is set to begin immediately, with Dr. Thorne scheduled to conduct her first official board meeting at 4 p.m. today to establish new management protocols and operational standards for the entire Sterling Trust organization. The timing was the final, brutal twist of the knife. It revealed that Aerys's patience wasn't a sign of weakness or desperation. It was a strategy, a precisely timed and executed plan to allow the maximum amount of documentation to be gathered before she wielded her newfound institutional authority. But the television wasn't quite finished destroying careers just yet. Sterling Trust's regularly scheduled promotional programming resumed, and the first face that appeared on the screen sent a final shockwave through anyone in the room still capable of processing new information. It was a confident, smiling teenager with a familiar bone structure and the same quiet strength radiating from his intelligent eyes. His voice, filled with a painful, tragic irony, filled the lobby. "Hi, I'm Leo Thorne. Sterling Trust Bank helped my family achieve our dreams. They've always provided respectful, professional service that treats every single customer with dignity." The last bit of color drained from Kevin Riley's face. The facial recognition, the shared features, the same last name, it all clicked into place. It should have been obvious from the very beginning. The bank's own diversity and inclusion campaign featured the son of the very woman he had just spent the last 20 minutes attempting to criminalize. The layers of institutional hypocrisy were so deep, so profound, it was almost poetic. Leo's recorded testimonial continued, each word an unconscious indictment that burned like acid. "My mom taught me that respect isn't something you earn, it's something you give universally. And Sterling Trust understands that. They know that every customer who walks through their doors deserves to be treated professionally, regardless of their background." His words, meant to praise the bank, were now condemning the very discrimination his mother had just endured, while he unknowingly promoted their family's core values. The promotional video cycled through more diversity messaging, taglines that now read like confessions of corporate fraud. "Sterling Trust, banking for everyone," scrolled across the screen, as the staff members who were supposed to embody that slogan realized they had violated every principle their employer claimed to uphold, and they had done it directly in front of the one executive who now had the power to enforce those standards. Maria Rodriguez, her hands trembling slightly, provided a final breathless commentary for her mushrooming audience. "Y'all, are you seeing this? They just discriminated against the woman who literally owns their bank now, while her own son's face is on their TV promoting their commitment to diversity. This is the most epic, most complete, most satisfying corporate comeuppance in the history of the world." Her viewer count was approaching 3,000 as the clip was shared, downloaded, and re-uploaded across every social media platform imaginable. Sharon's desk phone erupted, a cacophony of ringing from multiple lines as calls from corporate headquarters, regional management, and the crisis communications team all flooded in at once. The institutional emergency she had created had now gone nuclear. Aerys finally broke her strategic silence. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of the $4.3 billion acquisition behind it. "That check," she said, gesturing to the torn pieces on the floor, represented my signing bonus for completing Ethelred's acquisition of this financial institution. Her simple, factual explanation transformed their baseless accusations into irrefutable evidence of profound institutional bias. She continued with the clinical precision that had allowed her to dissect and restructure multi-billion-dollar corporations. I needed to deposit it before our 4 o'clock board meeting, where we are scheduled to finalize the new management structures and operational protocols for the entire Sterling Trust organization. Her timing had been perfect. She had allowed a complete, unassailable record of systematic discrimination to be created before revealing the power dynamic that now made accountability not just possible, but absolutely inevitable. Kevin, in a last desperate act of self-preservation, attempted to justify his actions. How were we supposed to know who you were? He pleaded. His question, so pathetic and yet so revealing, exposed the fundamental rotten core of discriminatory thinking. The idea that customers must first prove their worthiness to receive basic respect rather than being treated with professional dignity as a default standard. Aerys's response carried the measured, patient tone of a professor delivering a lecture that would determine a student's entire future. "Professional service, Mr. Riley," she said, using his name for the first time, "should be the standard for every single customer, regardless of their perceived status, their assumed credentials, or the color of their skin." Her words laid the foundation for the institutional earthquake that was about to begin. On the television, the promotional video returned to her son's testimonial. Leo's teenage face, now imbued with a terrible weight, looked out over the silent, terrified lobby. "Sterling Trust believes in treating every person with dignity and respect," his recorded voice explained, while his mother stood as living proof of the bank's catastrophic failure to live up to its own marketing. The clock showed 3:04 p.m. The public humiliation was over. The real confrontation was about to begin. The stunned silence that followed Aerys's revelation lasted exactly 7 seconds. It was shattered by the furious, panicked ringing of Sharon's desk phone. 4 lines lit up at once, the flashing red lights a visual siren of corporate meltdown. Regional Director Thomas Bradley's name and number glowed urgently on the caller ID, followed by calls from the corporate headquarters, the chief legal counsel, and the head of crisis communications. All of them were demanding immediate, impossible answers. "Sharon, what in the name of God is happening down there?" Bradley's voice, distorted by the speakerphone, exploded into the lobby. It was a voice shredded by sheer, unadulterated panic. "I'm getting emergency calls from board members, from our parent company's CEO, from media relations. Tell me this viral livestream showing my own staff discriminating against Dr. Aerys Thorne is some kind of sick, elaborate prank. Or..." The speakerphone, which Sharon had activated to intimidate Aerys, was now broadcasting her own corporate execution to the entire room. Maria Flores deftly adjusted the angle of her phone, ensuring her now 3,500 viewers had a crystal-clear audio feed of the meltdown. Aerys stepped forward, her movements calm and measured. She was no longer a customer. She was an executive taking control of a crisis. "Mr. Bradley, this is Dr. Thorne. Perhaps I can provide you with the exact, documented details of what has transpired here today." Her voice, a stark contrast to Bradley's frantic shrieking, was the epitome of calm authority. It was the voice of someone who not only understood the crisis, but had, in fact, orchestrated the conditions for it to unfold. "Sterling Trust Bank, Downtown Flagship Branch," she began, her tone analytical, as if she were reading from a prospectus. "One of 47 locations with approximately $2 billion in total assets, serving a customer base of around 12,000 individuals and businesses." She was dissecting them, reducing their existence to a series of cold, hard numbers. This specific location processes roughly $47 million in deposits annually, while employing 23 full-time staff members who, as of this afternoon, have proven themselves to be in immediate and desperate need of retraining in foundational customer service and basic human decency. On the other end of the line, Bradley's voice audibly cracked. "Dr. Thorne, I am profoundly, deeply sorry for whatever has occurred. We had no idea you were planning to conduct business at one of our branches today." His apology, so telling in its specificity, revealed the rotten core of the corporate mindset. That exceptional service was reserved for important people, not for everyone. "That, Mr. Bradley, is precisely the problem," Aerys responded, her words as sharp and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. "Professional service, basic dignity, should not be a privilege contingent on a customer's identity or their perceived importance. It should be the absolute, non-negotiable standard for every single person who walks into this institution, regardless of their appearance, their background, or the assumed value of their transaction." She then proceeded to transform her personal humiliation into a cold, calculated analysis of corporate liability. As of this moment, today's incident has been witnessed live by over 3,000 viewers and has been extensively documented through multiple recording devices. My legal team's conservative initial estimate places Sterling Trust's exposure for this discrimination lawsuit at approximately $50 million in compensatory and punitive damages, not to mention the irreparable brand damage, which could cost shareholders hundreds of millions more. Sharon Vance began to hyperventilate again, this time with ragged, audible sobs. The financial scope of her catastrophic error was now being laid bare in terrifying, quantifiable terms. Her petty abuse of power hadn't just created a human resources problem, it had generated a massive legal and financial liability that could very well jeopardize the entire $4.3 billion acquisition. Kevin, in a final, pathetic squeak of defiance, tried to defend himself. "The check looked suspicious. It was my job. Our fraud prevention protocols were triggered by the unknown company name." His voice rose in pitch with each word, as he desperately grasped for the cover of institutional policy that no longer existed. Aerys addressed him directly, not with anger, but with the weary patience of a professor explaining a simple concept to a student who simply refused to learn. "Ethelred Innovations completed its due diligence on Sterling Trust 6 months ago, Mr. Riley. Your fraud prevention training should have included, at a minimum, a list of the legitimate corporate entities currently involved in your own bank's acquisition process. That would seem to be a rather critical piece of information, wouldn't you agree?" She produced her phone, and with a few swift taps, displayed a screen of corporate documentation. Current Ethelred stock price, $947 per share. Sterling Trust's entire valuation is now entirely dependent on a successful and seamless integration with our technology infrastructure. This afternoon's documented display of systematic discrimination is in direct violation of Section 15, subsection 3 of our binding acquisition contract. The mention of a specific contract clause sent a visible tremor through Sharon's body. She knew what those clauses meant. They were legal tripwires, designed to protect the acquiring company from precisely this kind of operational or reputational failure. Section 15.3, Aerys explained with academic precision, for the benefit of everyone in the room and the thousands watching online, establishes a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory practices during the integration period. Any violation triggers an immediate management review and allows for a potential restructuring of the acquisition terms. This can include personnel decisions, operational status of individual branches, and even a renegotiation of the final purchase price. Bradley's voice came back over the speakerphone, now stripped of all its earlier bluster, replaced by the desperate, pleading tone of a man begging for his professional life. "Dr. Thorne, please. What can we do? Tell us what we need to do to address this situation appropriately. Sterling Trust is committed, absolutely committed to making this right. We will take any and all necessary corrective actions." Aerys checked her Patek Philippe watch with a deliberate, theatrical slowness. She allowed the tension in the room to build, to stretch to its absolute breaking point, before she delivered her ultimatum. "As I see it, Mr. Bradley, you have two distinct options for resolution." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle on her audience, both physical and digital. Option A involves a comprehensive, top-to-bottom institutional reform. This will include the immediate implementation of new dignity-first service policies, mandatory and rigorous monthly bias training for every employee from the janitorial staff to the board of directors, and the integration of systematic, technology-driven monitoring protocols to ensure accountability. She paused again, her gaze sweeping across the terrified faces of the bank staff. "Option B," she continued, her voice dropping to a cool, clinical tone, "involves Ethelred Innovations walking away from this deal and issuing a public statement that we are seeking to acquire a different financial institution, one whose corporate culture better aligns with our unwavering commitment to inclusive customer service and professional operational standards." The threat landed with devastating surgical precision. Walking away from the Sterling Trust deal would cost Ethelred Innovations approximately $50 million in sunk costs and legal fees, a significant but ultimately manageable loss for a technology titan of their size. For Sterling Trust, however, it would be an extinction-level event. It would mean the immediate vaporization of 2,400 jobs, the closure of 47 branches, the complete destruction of shareholder value, and the ignominious collapse of a century-old institution. All of that, she concluded, gesturing with a chillingly casual air towards Kevin, because one of your employees couldn't be bothered to treat a black woman with basic professional respect during a routine banking transaction. The brutal, elegant mathematics of corporate leverage was now crystal clear to everyone. Aerys Thorne possessed the institutional power to transform her personal experience of discrimination into a catalyst for sweeping, systematic change, not through emotional confrontation, but through cold, hard economic pressure. Her strategic patience had created the perfect conditions for absolute accountability. Sharon, seeing her only path to survival, immediately moved to sacrifice her subordinate. "Kevin Riley is suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation," she announced, her voice filled with a desperate, bureaucratic efficiency. "His actions do not represent the values or the training standards of Sterling Trust Bank." Her speed in throwing him to the wolves revealed an institutional priority focused solely on self-preservation, not on genuine reform. "Personnel decisions are insufficient," Aerys responded, her voice cutting through Sharon's panicked attempt at damage control. "You cannot fix a systematic problem by punishing an individual symptom. The disease is institutional, and so the cure must be as well." She then began to outline her requirements, not as requests, but as non-negotiable terms. "You will hire an external, independent consulting firm to conduct a full diversity and operational audit. You will implement mandatory monthly bias and de-escalation training with measurable accountability metrics tied directly to compensation and promotion. And you will integrate real-time customer service monitoring through digital feedback systems, which my team at Ethelred will design and provide, that will be integrated directly into employee performance evaluations." The specificity of her demands revealed that this was not an emotional reaction. This was a pre-planned strategy. These were evidence-based, systemic interventions designed to re-engineer the bank's entire culture, using structural modifications and technological oversight to make discriminatory behavior a fireable offense. On the phone, Bradley agreed to everything with the breathless enthusiasm of a drowning man being thrown a life raft. "Absolutely, Dr. Thorne. Yes, whatever resources you need, consider it done. We will implement every single one of your recommendations with full corporate support and an unlimited budget allocation." But Aerys wasn't finished. She had one more condition. "Additionally," she stated, "as a demonstration of its commitment to repairing the damage done to the community it claims to serve, Sterling Trust will make an immediate, unrestricted donation of $500,000 to local civil rights organizations, which will be chosen by a committee that I will personally appoint." This final term was a masterstroke. It transformed a personal insult into a community investment, creating a positive outcome from the ugly discrimination while establishing a powerful precedent for future corporate accountability. On the live stream, Maria Flores was providing an awestruck commentary for her rapidly growing audience. "Y'all, she's not just getting revenge. She's not just getting them fired. She is fundamentally restructuring the entire bank to make sure this can never happen to anyone else ever again. This is how you use power. This is how you turn discrimination into institutional change." Her livestream was no longer just a viral video. It had become an educational seminar on corporate accountability in action. Ashley, the young mother, knelt down and explained the situation to her daughters in simple, age-appropriate terms. "The nice lady," she whispered, pointing to Aerys, "is teaching the bank people how to be fair and kind to everyone. Sometimes grown-ups forget their manners, and she's helping them remember how to treat all customers with respect." The promotional video on the wall began another cycle. Leo Thorne's face returned to the screen, his image now carrying a profound new impact. His teenage confidence was a mirror of his mother's composure, creating a powerful visual irony that transformed corporate marketing into a tool of institutional hypocrisy that demanded immediate, drastic correction. Frank, the security guard, received a direct, frantic instruction through his earpiece from his own supervisor. He was ordered to provide his full and unconditional cooperation and assistance to Dr. Thorne. The tactical positioning that had begun as an act of intimidation now morphed into a protective escort service. Kevin Riley continued to stand frozen, the torn pieces of the check still clutched in his hand like the useless relics of a fallen king. His amateur fraud investigation had, ironically, preserved the perfect evidence of his own discriminatory behavior. Those paper fragments, which he had torn with such theatrical contempt, would now serve as Exhibit A, documentation of a bias so profound it would be referenced in corporate sensitivity training sessions for years to come. The clock showed 3:07 p.m. As the corporate crisis management machine accelerated into overdrive, legal teams were being briefed on emergency conference calls, and public relations specialists were desperately trying to craft damage control strategies for a discriminatory act that had already achieved permanent viral status across the globe. Aerys observed the institutional panic with a cool, clinical detachment. Her expression was that of a scientist observing the predictable results of a carefully designed experiment, not someone experiencing the emotional aftermath of a personal trauma. Her transformation from humiliated customer to a powerful corporate executive wielding the full force of institutional power was complete. But the systematic changes she was now implementing would outlast this specific incident, this specific bank, and everyone in it. "The board meeting begins in 53 minutes, she announced, her voice carrying a tone of finality. "I expect a preliminary draft of the reform implementation plan on my desk before we convene to discuss the future of Sterling Trust's operational standards." The demolition was over. The reconstruction was about to begin,